Hi, I'm John Stewart. I'm the founder and managing partner of MiddleGround Capital, and welcome to our new format for Executive Session, our podcast here where we talk about everything industrial manufacturing. And today I got two of our talented individuals here at MiddleGround Capital, Paul O'Brien and Miles Anderson, joining me. Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Paul O'Brien. I'm a managing director of human capital. I started off on the operations side, and then I took over for MiddleGround. Been here 20 months, mainly focused on CEO, CFO hiring, executive compensation, and then really all things human capital at MiddleGround. Before that, Nissan, and before that, Toyota, and that's where I met John.
Yeah, and so speaking of Toyota and John, did you ever have to answer any hotline calls when I was at Toyota?
Not me, but probably my superiors did.
Yeah.
The leaders there.
Pretty busy.
Yeah, probably.
What do you like to do for fun, Paul?
I like to fish. We were talking about fishing off the coast. That's great. I love to golf, hang out with the family.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing over the weekends at the pool.
You're from Louisiana, is that right?
I'm from St. Louis, but lived in Louisiana. That's where I was turned on to coastal fishing.
Yeah.
And now I live in Nashville. Love Nashville.
And he's married, ladies, so hands off. All right. Miles, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Miles Anderson, Vice President of Automation, Maintenance, and CapEx for MiddleGround Capital. A little bit about my background. I graduated from UK with a bachelor's in electrical engineering 2004. Worked at Lexmark International in design for about 10 years. And then I got the opportunity to go over to Toyota, joined them as a production engineer. I was there for about 8 years, and then joined MiddleGround in 2022 on the automation team. It's been a lot of fun and really enjoy it.
And so what do you like to do for fun, Miles?
Most of my hobbies are dictated by my sons. So, we'll do some camping, a lot of fishing.
Miles has twin 16-year-olds?
17-year-olds
now. Yeah.
Seniors in high school, so they're going to be off to college next year.
Yep. And what's one of your favorite memories of me from the past, Miles?
Well, there's a lot, but I'd say favorite memories. I really enjoyed getting to go fishing out on the ocean.
It was always fun. I had a group of Florida fishing guys and a group of Kentucky fishing guys, and it was always funny because when I took the Kentucky fishing guys, me and Miles would have to skin all the fish because nobody else knew how to clean the fish with teeth in their mouths. And then when the Florida guys would go, they would all clean the fish. So needless to say, the Florida guys went fishing more. But with that, we're going to jump into some topics that we have going on. One of the things that is really troubling manufacturing companies, and we own over 200 factories all over the world, and what we do is more about manufacturing than it is private equity. And one of the major challenges that we see today is labor. It's really difficult to get people to want to work in manufacturing jobs, not just in North America, also in Europe and all over the world. Young people today who've grown up with lots of technology, they want to move more towards services-oriented businesses. They don't really, want to go into manufacturing businesses for a variety of reasons, which we're going to talk about here today on this podcast and delve into a little bit. And we're going to talk about some of the solutions. So even though that, whenever there are challenges, there's always solutions. And that's a good thing about working in industrial companies and managing people in these situations. It's actually all about solving problems. Problems happen all the time, and it's about solving those problems. And so that's why Miles and Paul are here today. They can help talk about some of the things that are going on with labor shortages in manufacturing. So Paul, from your perspective, why don't you tell us why you think we're having some of the shortages in labor that we're having, and what are some of the challenges that we're seeing on the labor front?
Yeah, well, I think you hit it, John. I mean, I think it's a critical problem. I don't think it's getting any better. I know we dealt with this problem. I mean, my gosh, I've been in manufacturing for 30 years, and we probably dealt with it for 20, if not more. They estimate that, I was doing a little bit of research, and they estimate by 2030, 50% of the openings in manufacturing won't have people to hire. So we're talking 2 to 3 million people. Globally, that's 9 million people. So same thing. I mean, from more plants are being built here, more are being localized, be it distribution costs or, even just from the political landscape. We're bringing a lot of companies from overseas over to the U.S., and so that presents even more of a problem than what we saw in the past. I think you hit on it. Young people are looking for more tech savvy. I think we've done a good job marketing maybe robotics, and that type of thing. But as far as manufacturing, we haven't done a good job marketing it. I mean, people, if you ask young people, and I did a town hall or a round table with some individuals, they were all aging. They're all our age, and it's an aging workforce that's leaving. But when I ask young people what goes on in factories, they don't know. So I think from the robotic standpoint, they know. But as far as from, working on the line, they think it's just the repetitious work. And probably the second thing third thing that I heard was flexibility. They want the hybrid schedules. They want the flexible. They certainly don't want second shift. And I think that's really what's hurting, that environment of that manufacturing workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah,
people wanting to do things where they can earn more money and do less is not new. Like, people wanted to do that. Even our generation of people had their get rich quick schemes. We've all worked with people that always had, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go do that, and they had a side hustle or something like that. And today it's even more challenging because there's this whole generation of influencers now on social media, and so young people, they want a full-time job being an influencer, or my kids, wanted a full-time job playing video games, or and look, and there's people that are going to do that, and they're going to be successful in that. It's just like, when we were in school, some of us played sports, and, people were making money being professional athletes, but it's a very small percentage of people that go on to do that, just like it's a very small percentage of people that can be influencers, and it's a very small percentage of people that can, be successful in these different things. And then there's, then you come to the realization, okay, well, now what am I going to do to earn a living? And, for me, I got into manufacturing, probably a similar story to a lot of people. Why people start working is because I had a girlfriend, I wanted to get married. Right. And, and so I dropped out of college, went to work on the night shift, and started working. It was a really good opportunity to go work at a company like Toyota and to get your hands dirty. I was the kind of person I would have been very satisfied to go to college and have, and be a lifetime student, and do those types of things. But I wanted my independence, which, working gives you. And people value that, and I found manufacturing as a path to do that. And so a lot of young people out there are probably looking for what they want to do, and what you start out doing doesn't dictate what you're going to end up doing. And I think all of our backgrounds and resumes would attest to that as well. But definitely there's some challenges out there from a labor shortage standpoint. Miles, Paul talked a little bit about some of the items driving labor. How does technology play into the shortage of labor that we see out there today?
Yeah, so I think we can utilize technology to address some of those concerns. On the manufacturing floor, if you have short manpower, that's leading gaps in the line, in the manufacturing line. If you have those gaps, then you have to start doing things like you had at Toyota, trying to cover two jobs. Your production's impacted overall with that. So some of the technologies are not necessarily new. I think lean manufacturing blends itself very nicely with addressing some of those concerns, because you're able to look at the efficiencies of your workforce. You're able to utilize some lean tools such as Yamazumi's, standardized work, cross-functional, multifunction charts, things of that nature to
labor
help
planning tools,
all of that, right? To help address those, and those are really low-cost solutions that can actually drive efficiency out of the workforce that you have remaining. Some other things, technology-wise, next I would say is some of the visual management systems that you can put into place. FMDS boards, also and-on boards, things that show the current situation on the floor, be able to respond to a process that's down faster, and be able to get that process back up and running. And then ultimately with new technologies, you can put in automated solution for highly repetitive jobs and fill that gap in the line that's necessary. And so, that's one of the things we look for when we go throughout our factories is where can I put in automated solutions and reallocate that headcount to another position that needs manpower?
Yeah, so, a lot of people would think when you think about Toyota, one of the best manufacturers in the world, produce hundreds of thousands, millions of vehicles a year. But the factory's not highly automated, right? And there's a lot of people still involved in the manufacturing of the vehicle. It's not something that lends itself for complete robotic production, which, Tesla tried that when they launched the Model S and tried to over automate things, and that's why they didn't ramp up production well. But in the types of companies that we own that are these smaller businesses, the plants are $100 million of revenue or less per year. Miles, have you been kind of shocked at how old the technology is that they use in some of these plants?
Absolutely. I got a really good example of this. I was looking at automating feeding a centerless grinder at one of our race-winning brands plants. And so I'm taking measurements on site, gathering the make and model number of the machine, the manufacturer, and so forth. I come back here, and I'm looking at designing it in CAD, and I call up the manufacturer, and I say, hey, can you send me the CAD for this model centerless grinder? The guy goes, no, that went out of production 70 years ago.
Yeah, and they're still using it in production today, right?
Yes, that's right.
And, part of it is a testament to how well things were built, right? How well manufacturing, properly maintained, how well a piece of equipment will function. And we see that a lot. We have some kind of antique pieces here at the office, and some of our investors will ask us about those. And I'm like, well, those are real antique. They came out of a plant, but they might be 100 years old. But they're still operating today. And, if you're a small manufacturer, it's a family-owned business, multi-generation business. If it worked for dad and granddad and it still works today, I don't really have a reason to change it. And so there's definitely a lot of the small manufacturing companies can benefit from upgrading their technology, not even to 2025. There's been, a lot of technology come into play in 70 years, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Right? But just because you have something that's 70 years old doesn't mean you can't automate it either.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So why don't you tell us about how you guys, a lot of people are, why does a private equity firm have an automation team? So, what does the automation team do, and what role are they trying to play, to help these companies specifically battle the labor shortage?
Yeah, so our automation team here at MiddleGround Capital is it's really unique because all the team members have extensive experience in lean manufacturing, operational expertise. And that's extremely beneficial when you go out on the factory floor. As you're going through one of these small factories, as you said, we can quickly look at it and see the operational improvement opportunity that's there. But then they also have the creative ability to say, okay, if I do this operational improvement, here's the automation that I can then put in afterwards and achieve this type of result for this amount of capital being invested. And that's a really unique position because a lot of automation manufacturers, the way they operate is they receive an RFQ, and it doesn't give any details around the processing around it. It doesn't give it really many details on the existing equipment that's in there. And so, if you go to, take that centerless grinder example, if you go to another automation supplier, they're going to have to go on site. They're going to have to take measurements of the front of the machine because, as I mentioned, there's no CAD available of the existing machine. And they're going to have to figure out, okay, I have to bolt all of this on here. I have to design it so that it operates correctly and feeds and achieves the process. And that's the unique ability that this team has is we're able to see the existing equipment. We're able to understand the processing around it. And we're able to design, build, and install solutions that work on that piece of equipment.
Right. So you don't have to buy a new centerless grinding
Correct.
machine that's a 2020 version
right.
and automate it. You can automate the 1930 version, or 50 version, and make it work. And so that's one of the benefits of being able to walk on site and look and trying to figure out what they're trying to solve instead of them trying to design something and they might not know what's actually capable of being designed, right?
Yeah,
And-
Miles, you also talked about how it can be easier for the employees based on the automation, right? So I think they have this image that automation is going to come in and people are going to lose their jobs. But what you and I talked about is automation coming in helps them do their jobs easier, better, safer. So, I thought that was a good angle from an automation side too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that we really try to highlight with the automation, because rightfully so, these team members on the floor that have been running this equipment for long periods of time, they're nervous about automation coming on site. The robots are coming to take my job, right? Type of thing. And that's not necessarily true. And as we were talking to, the shortage in the labor manufacturing workforce right now is allowing us to reallocate headcount other places on the manufacturing line. So we're able to identify processes that might be monotonous, that might be unsafe, or things of that nature that team members really don't get much fulfillment out of their job from that. And so we're able to put an automated solution in there, reallocate them to a process that needs their flexibility, needs their judgment skills to run that other process in the manufacturing line, and feel more fulfilled from their job. The other fringe benefit out of this is somebody needs to be able to maintain that equipment. Somebody needs to be able to teach a robot to return home. Somebody needs to be able to reset it to the master position when or if an error occurs. And so that gives us an opportunity to train the team members for upskilling them. We're able to help them learn a higher level of skill with regards to this piece of equipment.
And automation is more about removing the repetitiveness of whatever the process is, and taking the burdensome work away from the operator. If you have 4 operators that are each operating a machine, and all they're doing is unloading and loading the machine, we've had technology around for 50 years that can load and load a machine, and those are the jobs that are typically the lower wages for these companies. And so when you can replace those 4 operators with 4 cobots and that are unloading and loading the machine, then you can retrain that worker on how to manage the cobot cell, right?
Absolutely.
And so now you've got, if they were paid $15 an hour each, that's $60 of labor that was being utilized. And those are the low-cost jobs that are hard to hire people for. They're the entry-level jobs where people, have issues, attracting talent in for that. Who wants to go do that? And at the end of the day, who wants to say all I did was do this all day long?
Right, that's the image.
Right? And so it's about removing that and doing things that, had more value to it. I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool to tell people that I ran a cell of 4 robots, and I knew how to program those and troubleshoot them. And so that actually makes them more valuable in the workforce. So then their wages can go up, and you can pay them more as a manufacturer with wages, and you can still become more profitable, even paying people more money. And so, that's the challenge. We started talking about labor shortage. So this isn't about eliminating workers. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to better utilize workers, with tools like automation.
And make it more attractive.
But Paul, Miles brought up a good point that, a lot of times the people are apprehensive. And so from a human capital standpoint, what are some tips, for the listeners out there when they're wanting to do automation, and, how should they talk to their team about it?
Yeah, I think in my, research, what I found is, some people do leave because of comp. I mean, they do, but compensation's not everything. And you can only give so much compensation. And then in some of the areas where, you're the only game in town, compensation's, you're fine. But when you're in these other areas where you have a lot of competitors, all you keep doing is moving that needle up from a compensation standpoint. And at some point, you just can't pay them anymore because then it eats into the profits, right? But what I found most from attrition, which is in manufacturing is usually around 25 to 30%. Don't like that, but that's what it is. Probably number one is culture. Do they like the people they're working with? Do they like the team? Is leadership good to them? Does leadership value them? I heard over and over again when I did this round table, I did it at Shiloh, Shout out to Heather and Mark and Buford and Billy. But anyway, they talked about we get transparent communication. We know what that company, what the company's status is, but we're also treated with respect and valued. So I think, you can pay people, you can give them benefits, but if they just feel like a machine coming in every day, that's not going to work. And so all of them talked about being valued. The leadership knew their names, knew who they were, knew something about their families. That's what makes the biggest difference. That's what I found in the research.
And so that's pretty universal to any type of managing people, not just in manufacturing, right? People aren't numbers; they're people, and everybody has their own life, their own goals. You might start out being the guy that's doing this, but you never know. You might end up being the guy behind the microphone, one day. If you stick to it. So,
but you remember the supervisor that didn't treat you well.
Absolutely, and you remember the ones that did.
Yep, absolutely.
And my advice for workers out there is, if you are aspiring to do more, you learn from everybody. Sometimes you learn what not to do. So if someone treats you bad, then you remember what it felt like when they did what they did, and then when you're in that position, don't do that. And that's how you can make people, use people that are bad supervisors and good supervisors for examples. But, not everybody that's in a leadership position is an easy person to work for. So that's difficult. But you mentioned communication, and that's something I think is just like people underestimate how important it is just to talk to people about things.
Even what I heard a lot about was feedback. Like if I get the right feedback, I know I'm doing a good job, or even if there's an area where I need to improve, then tell me that. Tell me where I stand. So a lot of that communication, and all of our, well, maybe not all of our facilities, but the ones that I checked into and the ones that I talked to the CHROs about, they all have talent management. They all have ability to move up in the company. My advice would be, but take your time, right? Everybody's ready to be the vice president the next day. But when you become the vice president, I don't think you know what that means, right? So take your time, learn each position, grow in that position, get those skills, get those experiences, get that knowledge so that you're better prepared when you get there. And sometimes people just don't hang in there. But the ones that do, I think all of us started at the bottom and we worked our way up, right? But we were patient. Where I think, there's some individuals, in this next generation that aren't as patient. Be patient, learn it, because when you get to the top, it's not always rosy, right?
No, not at all.
Just like what you mentioned, like sometimes supervisors and leaders, it's a tough job. They got to make hard decisions. And when they do, that's not easy.
Well, I can tell you when I put bumpers on the night shift at Toyota when I started, I had a tremendous amount of satisfaction in my work because at the end of the day, I had actually built bumpers and put them on these cars that were going to be out there and people were going to be driving them. And
you'd see them.
And you would see them. And I would be like, there's a 50% chance I put the bumper on that car, but you felt satisfaction working with your hands to produce something. It gave you a satisfaction. I make a lot more money than I did when I put bumpers on cars, but there's weeks and months I go by and I feel like I haven't accomplished anything, right, in my current job, right? And so, there's, yes, it's everybody has to start out somewhere, right? But it also can be the most fulfilling work. And that's why some people make careers out of it. There's people in our plants that have worked 30, 40 years. When you're out in the plants, Miles, and you're talking to people, at some of these facilities that have been there 30, 35 years, and they're doing the same thing over and over again, and they get a tremendous amount of satisfaction from, whether it's, running a milling machine or whatever. But, I rarely find somebody that's been doing this for 35 years, right? This is usually the entry job, and they're trying to get into the more skilled labor position, which pays better and has, again, more of that satisfaction for the employees.
Yeah, I would say, there's a rare case. I actually knew a guy who got his chemical engineering degree when I was at Toyota, and he was actually online there, and I said, why didn't you get a job in the chemical engineering field? And he said, I had one for a while, but it just wasn't fulfilling enough at kind of the point you're talking about. So he actually went online. He wanted to see things that he made each and every day and with his hands, and that was what he gravitated towards. But, to your point, generally, I think most people want to be able to progress onwards to the team leader position or into management position and make improvements overall in that. I think that's a true statement.
But Miles, even the jobs that people are doing, they may be doing 12 different jobs, right? I mean, they're not just doing one. They learn 2 and 3 and 4, and they do rotations. I don't think people understand that, right? I mean, there were some people at Toyota, they did 12 jobs, and they would rotate, so they weren't doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so that gave them some, it was complexity, but it also gave them, it just wasn't as boring as
a little bit of variety.
Yeah, a variety.
Yeah.
I don't think people know that. I think they think that you just do one job all day long, and that's not true.
Well, there's satisfaction in that, like, you go into Toyota and you're like, okay, we're going to produce 550 cars a day. Right? And you make 550 cars and you go home and you're satisfied because you've completed like what's been asked of you for the day. Mm-hmm. And as you move into management positions, like we talk about it all the time, you could work 24 hours a day and not complete everything. Right? And so you have to find a way to kind of replace that yourself, and motivate yourself and, have milestones and objectives and ways to measure it. But don't want to, especially, talking to people that are thinking about going into manufacturing, don't underestimate how satisfying it can be to do things and work with your hands. And when you're working in a mechanical industrial process, it also can help you just with like a life, because you got to think through the logic of how the machine operates. If you're operating a machine or a process, there's a systematic way of going about it. And so, then you can become, maybe you're the kind of guy that you don't know the difference between a crescent wrench, a vice grip, or a hammer, right? And you couldn't fix anything. But if you go into like a manufacturing operation, you're going to get exposed to those tools, those literal tools, and working with your hands and getting more confidence and being able to do things. And you can roll over into your personal life to make it where, you even want to challenge yourself in your personal life. And Miles, I know you have a hobby of bladesmithing, and I'm sure elements of your engineering background and automation kind of flow over into that when you're just pounding on a blade.
Yeah. It's satisfying. It's a simple type of work, I think, but I really enjoy a lot of understanding the processes. And, one of the things that I actually branched out into it was actually casting, casting aluminum, sand casting, that type of stuff. And it's really enjoyable to actually make things.
You do sand casting now?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, can you make engine blocks? We need a caster for Dart engines. So
for race winning brands,
we'll get you going
easy
there.
Now, easy.
No, so Miles talked about our fishing. One of the best gifts I've ever gotten was Miles made me a fillet knife when he kind of first started out. And I think you did like 7 different versions or something.
Yeah,
before you got that one
right.
to give to me, because you knew I would kind of be scrutinize it.
Yeah, it was a Damascus blade.
But no, it's one of the possessions that I actually just saw it the other day, and it's something that I remember he took the time to make this with his own hands, and so I really appreciate that. For all the times that we went fishing together. And so we've covered a lot of different topics today. What are some like closing thoughts you would want to leave the listeners with, Paul?
I mean, I would say, with an aging workforce, we need next generation workers. I mean, you have to have them. I mean, if we're going to be 2 to 3 million short, not only are we not going to be able to produce, but the consumers are not going to get the product they need, right? So it works on both ends. But the other thing that you were talking about, like people like doing things on the side, the side hustle, 47% of next gen have a side hustle. We used to think of that as like a second job, and we didn't want it, right? Mm-hmm. But they do that. But you can do both. I mean, you can do manufacturing, you can do that job, plus you can do your own thing on the side if you want to do that. But, we need next gen. I would love for people to get more educated. I'd love manufacturing to do more marketing on exactly what is done in a factory. And, I mean, I think like we're sitting here because we had careers in manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And, I hope, the younger generation are sitting here, like you mentioned, someday too, doing the same thing that we are.
And most of our companies, and, at Toyota had this, it's how I got my college degree. is I got it while I was working. And so sometimes working a second shift or a third shift and then having the company be willing to pay for your education and for you to be able to, take classes, more on a measured process, and you can earn money and take care of a family and get your degree all at the same time, so you can improve your, your situation for yourself if that's what you want to do. It doesn't have to be a long-term, game for everybody. I mean, I'm not, building bumpers every day on cars today. So, there's a path on, as Miles said, to something bigger and better. But yeah, we need more manufacturing people. Absolutely. We have become a society of collecting things, so much so that now almost everywhere you go all over the world, we have these storage centers where you can pay, hundreds and thousands of dollars a month to just store overflow stuff. And we want to hang on to everything, but we want to consume. We're consuming things, and we always want the newer, the better thing. So there's this culture, but someone's got to make all those things. Someone's got to manufacture all those things, and they just don't, it just doesn't happen out of thin air. The technology's not there to automate everything, so that there's no people involved at all out there. So the good point that you brought up there, Paul. What about you, Miles? If there's some final comments that you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I'd say there's really two things. The first one is if you're facing a manpower shortage in manufacturing, consider lean manufacturing and the tools that go with lean manufacturing for helping address the existing deficiency that you have there. You can better utilize the workforce that you have through lean manufacturing tools. The second thing that I would say is don't necessarily be scared of automation. It can actually be a benefit even for the workers on the line. It's a good thing for them to be able to be reallocated to a more fulfilling role, a safer role even, right? And that's the avenue that we really are trying to fulfill with automation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like Paul mentioned earlier, communication is important. Talking with your team about the automation project. The first thing that we do when we're going to automate at any one of our companies, the very first thing we do is go talk to the line workers. And we want to talk to them about what problems they're experiencing, what are the issues, because, again, we're trying to solve their problems. And if you solve their problems, then you can improve the overall operation. And we've talked about some different tools that we use here. Labor planning tool is a tool that I think is really important. It was a tool that we, used at Toyota, as knowing how to allocate your labor to get the most of them. And that's a tool that we make available. If anybody out there listening wants a copy of that tool, we're happy to provide it to you, whether you're in a distribution business and you're counting items or picks or lines per hour, or whether you're a manufacturing company that uses standard labor hours or earned hours, or whether you're just a small business and you're just trying to figure out how many people that you need to manufacture based on a certain level of revenue, that the tool will help you to understand the workforce that you need and factor in things like absenteeism and those types of tools. And so there's a lot of good tools out there that Miles mentioned that can help you in manufacturing your business. And automation should be a tool that's in your toolkit. It's not the savior of everything. It's not going to fix all of the problems. Like we said, not every process, can you take the human element out of it? And not cost effective anyway. And for every manufacturer, they got to find their own balance of that. And so, but for the people out there that have never thought about manufacturing, it's never too late to get started. If you want to get back in the workforce and you're a mom that's been stayed at home with your kids and you want to get back out on the workforce, manufacturing can be a really rewarding experience and can be a nice career for you. And for young people, don't underestimate the power of starting out in the manufacturing environment, because just because you start out being the person that's loading and unloading the machine doesn't mean that you won't end up the guy hosting a podcast.